Hey everyone, I'm Stephanie, host and head bookologist here at the Get Literate podcast. I'm a book loving, notebook hoarding reader and writer on a mission to change lives one book and one notebook at a time. On this podcast, we explore the power of bookology. What's that? That's the study of books and reading and notebooks and writing mixed with mindful practices and creativity to create lives we love. Here, you'll find episodes exploring the reading and writing life and how they can make our actual lives better. You'll get book recommendations and notebooking prompts around particular themes, and you'll even hear from authors and special guests who can fuel our reading and writing hearts and help us take inspired action in our own daily practices. So, grab a notebook and your TBR list, and let's get literate. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Get Literate podcast. I'm your host, Stephanie Affinito, and I'm here with an introduction to today's guest, a guest that I admire for her journaling, her creativity, and her love of nature, but especially the way she puts all of those things together. Karen Houlding is here to talk about all of those connections, to explore a form of journaling that I'd love to dip my toes into, to share the books that have influenced her creativity the most, and much more. She shares her passion on her I Am Chasing Butterflies blog and her Instagram handle of the same name. I have loved our chatting back and forth, especially our Instagram messages that get us to read new books and buy new classes. And today we get to talk with her live to learn from her together. Karen, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to talk with you today.
Oh, thank you so much, Stephanie. It's a real treat to chat with you today.
Yeah, I feel like it's a long time coming. Like everything was aligning to get us to finally talk live in person. And I think today really shows, as I mentioned off camera, the power of podcasts to bring people together who love the same things. So we are both fans of Windowsill Chats with Margaret Tantow, which is this amazing podcast on creativity. And I listen every week, was so honored to talk to Margot on her podcast. And that's where you found me, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So we had that shared love. We connected. We both love books. We both love journals. And now you're getting me to love nature even more.
Oh, good. It's working.
It's working. It's working. So I'm so excited to bring you on and give everyone else the chance to know who you are and really enjoy the work that you're doing. So let's start with good old-fashioned introductions. I would love you to tell listeners a little bit about you, about your work and the things that you do and our shared interests that we love.
Sure. Well, I grew up in Ontario, Canada, in cottage country. So I was surrounded by rivers and lakes. So nature's been ingrained in my life right from the start. And then I've lived in Vancouver, BC after that, and really was so interested in living near the mountains and the ocean, and then uh, moved to Florida with my now husband, and just a whole different world there too. So now that we're back on the West Coast and uh, really enjoying the mountains again and the forests, and I find that's my happy place. And so creativity has always been in my life too. So when during the pandemic, uh, working from home, I wanted some things to do in the off time, and I found watercolor painting tutorials on YouTube, and that kind of was something new for me to learn in my creativity. And from there, it led to I found a nature podcast. And then from there, it led to the nature journaling community. And I thought, wow, this is really interesting because it combines my my love of creativity, but also the nature that's been in my life all this time. I've been observing nature, but there was no way to really remember everything. And so when I combined those two things into a nature journal and learned some little tips and tricks, it just all came together. So it just, and I could add a little bit of science in there too, because I like to research things. But then now I'm expanding more into how does it make you feel? And can you just do some writing about how the sunshine was shining through the leaves or the flowers and the bees were buzzing and the sounds and using your five senses. So that was such, it was kind of the piece I was missing. And so that act of recording things in the journal helps you to remember, and it also sparks memories from experiences that you've had.
I would probably say it helps you stay present in that moment too, right? It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to ruminate or worry or stress when you are thinking of those beautiful things that you just mentioned. Just listening to you talk about it made me feel like my nervous system went down a notch, imagining doing those things.
Yes. Being present is probably the number one sort of guidepost of nature journaling. And just slowing down and relaxing and just having some time for ourselves to just, you've talked about adaptation energy on one of your other episodes that I had never heard of, and that was another link for me that said, yes, we have to fill up our own cups and our energy, to be able to help other people or cope with something unexpected that comes along.
Mhm. Now, I didn't realize though, Karen, that this was fairly new since the pandemic. I've got to say, listeners, if you were to go to the Instagram, to her Instagram handle, if you're driving, obviously do it later. But when you scroll and you look at your blog and you see those images, this is not something I would have thought you have said that this was a fairly new thing. It looks like someone who has been perfecting this forever. Like they're gorgeous. And I know you are about the process, but I just have to say, like listeners, if you do nothing else, click on the link and just scroll and see what you have done. Because the way you have blended that kind of drawing or the watercolors or whatever medium with your words and with some of the facts, it is this beautiful like alchemy of just all things good on the page.
Yes. Oh, thank you so much. It really did start very simply because I really hadn't sketched, and I like to say sketch over drawing because sketching has a much looser, more relaxed feel about it. We're just
Yeah.
getting the essence of the nature element that we're recording in the journal, and it's it starts very simply, and I think I hadn't really drawn anything. I was looking back, like my elementary school science projects were all about flowers and birds and trees, and I don't think I really sketched anything. So getting back into that was really, and I started off tracing outlines of different things for the watercolor courses because that just took that element out of it. But once you start, there's some techniques in nature journaling called blind contour drawing where you keep your pencil on the paper and you're looking at the object and you just move the pencil without looking at your paper. And it really helps your brain and your hand become a team. And that practice is a warm up. And just like you're doing, tennis lessons or piano lessons, you can warm up for sketching. So by doing those blind contour drawings. So sometimes I just walk around my backyard and kind of sketch whatever's blooming or what leaves are coming out, and maybe there's a mushroom coming out in the grass. So that really helps, and it helps you to get things down quicker on the page so that you're not, you know, fussing with everything and trying to get every little, point of the leaf and detail, because that's not what it's about. It's like what you said. It's the process. How are you learning about what you're seeing and recording it on the page and getting, you know, to know how you feel, and are you relaxing and just listening to the sounds at the same time. And so that's kind of an interesting, process over product, really. So,
Yes. And as I mentioned before, we press play, it can be really easy as an adult trying to lean into a creative anything, um, to overfocus on that product, to want it to look right, to have it be a certain way, when we know that all of the good stuff, all of the good benefits, all of that presence, all of that feeling happens in the process. And I'm hoping you'll give us some tips in a little bit on additional ways to get over that. Although I'm definitely going to do exactly what you just said to at least one object in my in my environment today to give it a try. I would love for you to talk more about what comes out of that process, right? So you're blending writing, you're blending creating, you're blending sketching, you're blending journaling, and we share of the same mind that all of those things have really positive benefits. I would love for you to talk about what it has given you, right? We'll get to the how for everyone, but what does blending that together really mean to you, and kind of offer yourself in that process so that we could decide how we want to get that too.
Well, it's really a process that, like we said, it just helps you to slow down. And there are not many things in our lives that help us do that, with all the fast paced and all the technology. So I call myself analog, not digital, because I still handwrite letters and cards to people in the mail. And I've been making my own cards for 10, 15 years. So all of those things put onto a journal page, and just the love of learning. I realized, I homeschooled my boys during the middle school years, and I realized that my love of learning, I learned right along with them, and so that instilled that part in me. And the nature journaling is a learning process too. You're learning about the natural world and what's going on, and observing what's blooming at what time, and why do the bees visit this flower and not that flower. And there's just an endless number of subjects that you can create, and it helps me, to be more mindful of things, especially when you're noticing all the details of what you're sketching and what you're learning. And then, that's one of my takeaways from the workshops and the meetups that I share with people is these detailed oriented skills that you're learning can help you in all of the other areas of your life. If you're taking an educational class, or if you're having a conversation with someone and really listening to their words and kind of picking signals up, and even in safety and security, keep looking around you, making sure you're aware of your surroundings, or when you're driving in the car, making sure you're noticing every part of the drive. Sometimes, we get home and we're like, "Well, I don't really remember going through
All
that
the time.
light." And we're kind of on autopilot. And I think nature journaling kind of helps us to slow down, okay, and be really noticing the details. So, and I like to apply that skill to other parts of our lives, just like you talk about with the books we read. And I
Yes.
have always done that with my nonfiction books, but hearing your podcast, and I've kind of been trying to start to do that with fiction books,
Yeah.
which is fabulous.
Yeah.
It's the piece I was missing from my reading life. So thanks to you, that's helped me as well. So
That makes me so happy, right? Because now we've just, when we look at fiction books that way, we just open ourselves to like hundreds of miniature life coaches at our fingertips that could teach us something. I do love how your focus isn't just on watercoloring, isn't just on sketching objects. It is specifically tied to nature. And as a kid, I wanted to get as far away from nature as I could. I know we would be great friends in real life right now, Karen, but as a kid, I don't know. I was the girl who was hiding in her room reading a book and did not want to go outside at all. You would have had to pull me along for some of those adventures maybe you had outside. But as I get older, right, I am just so drawn to the natural world in a different way. I am continually amazed every time I listen to someone, I read a book about nature, and whether it's a podcast or I just go for a walk in the woods, of how many lessons that I learn in nature that immediately apply to my actual life. I can't remember the podcast I was listening to, but I remember when I learned that as the leaves change in the fall, which is the most beautiful time of year here in upstate New York, it's gorgeous. I love it. I look forward to it every year. Is actually, the leaves dying off of the tree because the tree realizes I have to save myself. I have to preserve my energy. I have to slow down. And I just remember like a thunderbolt, like, oh my gosh, there was beauty in that. And I feel like every time I learn something about nature, every time I look at something that you've shared, there's like a tidbit there that maybe in the science of the natural world, but always feels like it has an implication for our real life and our emotional one too. And I feel like that's such a beautiful combination that you end up getting on the page.
Thank you. Well, I'm really curious about what was so scary to you as a young person. But when I was young, snakes were just, and they still are. But I just have always had this fear of snakes. So we don't have any poisonous ones here. But one of the things that people have said is if there's something that you're scared of, you should sketch it and put it in your journal because going through those details and maybe learning about that animal or whatever it is can help you. It's almost like therapy. But one day I was walking on our nature path in the green belt behind our house, and it was a sunny, warm day. And I'm looking up, of course, looking at the birds and things. And twice, there was a snake on the trail. And I, you know, didn't see them, but I heard them, and then I looked down and saw them going back into the forest. Well, that just was too many for me. So what I did was I came home, I looked up a photo of, yeah, I think it was just a garter snake, and I put a little section of the snake, like a little, few inches, and just drew two lines on my page. And then I didn't know this, but there were like beautiful red stripes and a yellow stripe, something like that. And just by sketching two of those lines, sections of the snake, and then learning about them, helped me a little bit
Yeah.
to appreciate them. So that's something that you could do
Yeah.
as a way of kind of processing through something that isn't quite so comfortable.
Yeah. That's such a good point because our notebooks work for a lot of different aspects around that. Once you put it on the page, it can become less scary or helps you look at it differently, whether it's a problem in your life or getting over a fear of a snake, which really shows the therapeutic benefits of this, as well as the creative, of course, and the
Hmm.
more fun aspect to it. Now, you're a book lover like I am. So I would love to have you share some of the titles that have influenced you on this creative journey that you've been on.
Sure. Well, I was thinking about this, and as far as creativity goes, which I think was always in my life before nature journaling, and three books came to mind. And my all-time favorite book is The Gifts of Imperfection with Brene Brown. And I've studied it three times. I've gone through it three times. I've art journaled every guidepost. There are 10 guideposts.
Oh, wow.
I've printed those pages out and given them to my family, given them copies of the book, studied it with a dear friend who is my book club partner. And it's I kind of wish it was a curriculum in high school to give students that confidence right from, a young age.
I
But
agree.
that continues to inspire me. And she has a quote that goes, "Talk to yourself the way you would talk to someone you love." So, you know, don't strive for perfection, but just listen to yourself, talk to yourself as the way you would talk to somebody else that you love. And the second book is Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert, which is just a wonderful, encouraging, sort of whimsical
Yeah.
journey into inspiring you and encouraging you to be creative. And my most favorite quote is, "Most things have already been done, but they have not yet been done by you."
Yes. Oh, that is such a good one.
It just encompasses everything about encouraging you to put your sketches on the page and just go for it. And
Yes. Yes.
you don't have to show your work to anybody. These sketchbooks can be just for you.
Mhm.
And then the third book is a recent one, Wabi Sabi by Beth Kempton.
Oh, we love
I
in here.
oh I I have done a lot of things Beth Kempton ever since learning about her from you, and it's just been an incredible addition to my inspiration books. But as far as nature journaling goes, there are lots, and I didn't know this before, but there are lots of nature journaling books. But the three that I kind of bring with me to my meetups are there are three different levels of journaling. And so the person who started this nature journal club um, is John Muir Laws, and his book Law's Guide to Nature Journaling is a very comprehensive, uh, very detailed, wonderful book, and it's a wonderful reference. Another book that I really enjoy by Claire Walker Leslie is Keeping a Nature Journal, and it's just a wonderful. It has more of the feelings in it, and just the journey, and she uses a lot of colored pencils with just scribbling in sections of color, and it just is so freeing, that you don't have to get the even you can color outside the lines. So, and then uh, a book that people can get started with is called Green Sketching by Dr. Ali Foxen. And that one talks about really being outside and doing your sketching, just putting in, the contour lines of the landscape, and really just focusing on the process and being present and keeping things simple, and instead of getting the perfect picture on the page. So those are some that I have influenced me, and I can highly recommend.
So I'm curious because you've read all of the books and they're in your brain and you've used them and you've adapted some ideas from them. If someone is brand new to this idea of nature journaling and they're just hearing about it, just listening to us for the first time, how would you describe what nature journaling is in your own words based on what you've read and what you've been practicing?
Sure. So nature journaling is observing something in nature and recording it into a notebook. That's the very basic. It's very simple. When I meet with people and introduce, I give them a 5-minute introduction and start with that. And then, there's three kind of guideposts that we follow, and they're simply, I notice. So what are you noticing? What draws your attention? And then the second one is, I wonder. What are you wondering about? What questions do you have? And you can write your questions down on your page. Often people do. And sometimes we don't find the answers to the question, and that's okay. We can just be curious. Curiosity is at the core of everything nature journaling. And then the third guidepost is, it reminds me of. So we're making connections with a memory that we've had or something that we've seen. For example, if you rub a mint leaf in the garden and that scent just reminds you of, something that, your grandmother made in the kitchen when you were a child, or just invokes memories. So those are the basics. And then we just say, well, we can get those three things down onto the page in three different ways. There's a lot of threes in this process. And we can get those things down with words, writing scientific facts. We can write uh, haiku poems. I started writing those this winter. And how do you feel? What are you seeing? What's the weather like? What birds have visited you? And also with sketching, getting a quick sketch down onto the page. And you can segment your page into different sections. You can draw circles so that you just have this little space where you're drawing small things instead of feeling overwhelmed by the whole page. And we can also represent what we're observing by numbers. If there's a flock of geese flying over, you can kind of estimate, okay, there's a group of 10, and it looks like, oh, there's maybe 50. And, just measuring, I've been measuring our western white trilliums are starting to bloom here. So I take my ruler out into the forest and I kind of measure how much it's growing each day and each week. So those are kind of the basics. And from there, everybody's journal style is different. And there are so many different ways of doing things. So that's the beauty of it, is that there's no experience required and there really are no rules. So it's, yeah, it's very open and to your own interpretation.
Mhm. I love your definition because of how accessible it is. It's observing nature and recording it in a notebook. Any one of us could do those things unless we get in our own way, right? If we interrupt ourselves with, oh, it should look like this. But the fact of the matter is that process of observing and recording is at the heart of this. And anybody, it's like what is that movie? Ratatouille. Anybody can cook. Anybody can nature journal. It sounds like if you just show up with that curiosity and with that willingness, like you can do it.
Yes, and you can even just write words if that's what you're more comfortable with in your
Right.
nature journal. Or you can start in the morning with sketching your coffee cup if that's what you're comfortable with.
Right.
Because even that all that practice, they call it pencil miles in the nature journal world. So you can really, sketch your books, whatever your plants in your house. So there's lots of options.
I love that. Pencil miles. That is a term that's going to make me very happy. Um, something since we have met, since I see your feed often in my Instagram and I think about this nature connection, I haven't started actually putting things on paper yet, but you're inspiring me to do that now that we are talking live. But what I have done uh, because of you is when I walk, I am noticing. So when you said I notice and I wonder, that I am finding is a muscle that I have practiced in nature that has grown because I know you're out there doing it too. And I feel really good about that part. Like I am noticing things, I'm hearing sounds. I have an app on my phone now where I can just record the bird song and see what it is. Something that I never, old Stephanie would have just been walking trying to plan the next Zoom meeting she had. And so now it is so wonderful to do that notice. And well, I wonder, and then I go home and I might Google something that I saw. But what I haven't done yet, that I feel like is my missing piece, that is all kind of falling into place of how powerful it could be, is that number three. It reminds me of. Right? That's when you're making the connection. That's when you're saying it gets to the emotional, it gets to the feeling. Oh, I feel like I'm ready for that now. I've done the noticing, I'm doing the wondering, and I feel like now when I show up to the page, I'm going to get it. That was just the thing that clicked into place for me of nature journaling, yes, it's about observing nature and noting it, but it's what happens inside of you when you do that feels like the magical part.
Yes. And if you're wanting a place to start, that's actually a good place to start too. Because it's such an open season for what you can put into your book. Maybe you start with something like a bird that reminds you of, a bird that came to your feeder when you were a child, or, like the herb garden. Maybe you can, just rub the leaves of the and get the scent. And what does that remind you of? And just start with that and have a focus, because maybe on the flip side, because it's so open, you don't really know what to put in your journal. And when I do my nature walks, I notice a lot of things like you are too. And I want to get everything into my journal. I dream up journal pages as I'm walking, but I have to reel it back and say, okay, what is my one highlight from this walk that I really want to? And I have a tiny journal that my dear friend gave me that fits in a little bag. And so I just take that with the pen and I'll pick one thing on my nature walk and just sketch that. It literally takes a minute. And then I write the date. That's something else that's really important with the nature journal page. If you're having trouble with the blank page and getting started, you can write, we
Yeah.
call it metadata, and just the date, the place where you are, the weather, and maybe the title of the
Mhm.
page. And then you can that kind of gets your fear of blank page over
Yeah.
with.
Breaks
And
the ice
so
a bit. Yeah.
breaks the ice. And then the tiny journal is just so brilliant because there's not a lot of space. So and some days I just make lists of all the birds that I'm hearing. And because of that app, the bird app, I've kind of trained myself to learn the different bird calls, because you don't always see them, they're
Yes.
hiding. And so now I can pick out those sounds. And if there's one I don't know, then I can turn the app on and learn by repetition. So I just make lists of all the birds I've seen and or heard. So
Yeah.
that's another thing to do is just making lists.
I'm glad you mentioned your little notebook and your pen because I was going to ask, do you take your supplies in nature with you and, find yourself a nice patch of grass and sit down and nature journal there? Or do you just soak it all in, come back home, and then pick what you want to do? Or does that matter? Can we do both? How do you recommend someone proceeds like that?
So you can do both. And my regular journal is, I think it's 5.5 by 8 inches or something like that. So it fits in a smaller bag, and I could
Yeah.
take that with me. Um, and so it's a combination for me. Sometimes I take my journal, and if I'm with other people or my family walking, there's not always the time to stop and sketch something. So I do take photos and work from the photos later back at my desk. But there's something so different about actually sketching something when you're outside, because you can feel the sun, you can hear the birds or the breeze, on your face, and it's quite a beautiful experience
Yeah.
uh, to do that. So I've been trying to do that more. But of course, it doesn't really work in the rain. So you can take photos and just work on things back in your desk.
Mhm. It just all sounds lovely. Like just thinking about that of just allowing yourself the space to
Yeah.
go outside with a little notebook and sketch. I love how you say sketch instead of draw. That definitely makes me feel like I could sketch something rather than draw it. And that reminder that no one has to see it could also be the key that gets people started. Break the ice with that metadata, sketch without having, a product in mind. And no one has to see it anyway. This can be just for you.
Yeah. And there are plenty of pages that I have that kind of things went wonky, and just didn't turn out the way I thought they would. And I should really share more of those. I don't mind sharing those because and I think the other day I did share something because my daffodil was all wonky, and I just said that in my description. I just said, "Well, the daffodil went kind of wonky," but
And I loved that, by the way.
yeah,
I
I
loved
felt
that because
yeah,
it could all
I
be
felt
wonky
really
daffodils.
yeah, I felt good about being out there and sketching it and seeing what's blooming and the color. I just love color. So sometimes here's another thing you can do is if you're into watercolor painting, or you could even take your colored pencils or even crayons, and I go around the yard and just paint color swatches, a circle or a square for each color. I mix up the watercolor paint and just paint a color swatch. I think they call it color spotting or something. And that's a really fun exercise too, because then you're just noticing color. You're learning to mix watercolors, and yet you didn't have to draw the flower and worry about the shape of it. So
I love that. That
yeah,
I can do.
yeah,
That is another one I could do.
good.
Now, I know we don't have to share, but thankfully you do share. So I would love to give you a chance to talk about where you are sharing your work, your blog, your Instagram. Tell us where, you're sharing this work and how that probably enriches the experience for you, someone who wants to put that out there.
Well, my Instagram is I am chasing butterflies, all one word.
Mhm.
And then my blog is I am chasing butterflies.wordpress.com. And the way I came up with that name was I was seeing butterflies flying across the yard in the summer, and they fly from one yard over the fence, and I run out with my camera and try and catch it, and it would stop from it, but then it would just keep going to the next yard. And so I found myself out there chasing them all the time. And I thought, well, isn't this a lot like the way nature is? When I go on my walks, like I said, I just want to sketch everything, and I'm saying, oh, look at this moss, look at the way this leaf is unfolding and uncurling, and that squirrel running up. And so I just thought, well, na- chasing butterflies is just like there is an endless number of things to notice in nature and appreciate. So I just thought, well, the thrill is in the chase
Yes.
of all of these things. So that's how that came about.
Yeah. I love that. And like you said, you've got these beautiful images, I would say, that are beautiful to look at, but you do talk about them and you talk about the inspiration and the process of them on both your blog and your Instagram. Now, I don't know if I'm going to say this right. Maybe I won't say the first name, but one that I was fascinated with that you posted recently that I just dove into the facts. I loved the border. I couldn't believe the watercolor, but the hummingbird, that page is beautiful. How do you like what's the actual name that comes before hummingbird so I don't mess it up?
It's called a rufus.
It is. Okay. It looks like that, but I wasn't sure. Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
I
So
loved that page.
that's another thing, like, we've noticed those. So we have the Anna's hummingbird here all year round. They have a green back, and the males have a ruby-throated neck. But in the summer, like starting right about now through July, this other hummingbird called the Rufus hummingbird comes through, and we've always noticed it. And oh yeah, the Rufus is here, and they're just a tiny bit smaller than the Annas. But then I started diving into it when we saw one this past week, and I thought, well, I just read recently that they migrate, and I thought, well, where do they migrate to in the winter? They actually migrate to Mexico or very southern United States where it's warmer, and they come back through here. They pass through, they stay for a little bit, maybe nesting. Some of them go up to all the way up to Alaska. And then in July, they start migrating back down the Pacific coast to Mexico again. And it just fascinated me. And well, 2 or 3 years ago, I did research the same process for monarch butterflies, which I'm just enamored with because I grew up in the East. So monarchs were just always there, but the monarchs don't make it up this far into Washington state. So that's another kind of fun thing to do, is to really notice uh, things that are migrating through and searching them, and I wasn't confident I could draw this bird, because usually I draw plants and leaves because they're so forgiving. You don't have to be precise, but with the bird, I thought, oh boy, what am I going to do? And so I did put it life size in there, and I just sketched with a pencil and just tried to put in the basic shapes first, just an oval for the body and then a circle for the head. And then you just kind of start smoothing things out with the pencil with multiple lines and little strokes. And eventually you get there with something that looks like a hummingbird. So,
It does look very much like a hummingbird. It was beautiful. I want to share one more thing that I loved from your feed lately, um, because it was one of those moments where I realized we were thinking of the same thing. So I had sent you something on Instagram that said, "You need the seed workshop with Rebecca Lowell," and
yes.
you were already ready to go and knew of her. And I just have to say, those cards are beautiful. They're beautiful. And I
Thank
love
you.
how you're continuing to learn and grow in nature journaling, as at the same time as you're sharing everything you're learning and inviting everybody to. And it's like a good life when you do that, right? When you are just filling yourself up and sharing it with everybody around you. I can just feel
Yes.
kind of energy on your feed and on your blog.
Oh, thank you. Well, sharing, it doesn't come easy. And by the way, I hadn't heard of this seed sketching artist. And so you introduced me to her, and I fell in love with her bird book. I
Yeah.
took seed sketching class. And so seed, and because I knew that those brown, crispy bits from the winter are just so interesting to me. I'm not sure why. So it was a lovely, and I kept going with looking around my craft desk. I have several seed pods there, so I sketched a bunch of those. But sharing hasn't always come easy, and I have to say the organization, the Wild Wonder Foundation, is what gave me the confidence, because they have this wonderful program where you can sign up to be a nature journaling ambassador. And so I did that. It's just a simple free sign up, and then they send you this lovely package of stickers and different things of presentation. And they have developed the most beautiful zine, those little mini fold
Yeah.
up pieces of paper, but it's so gorgeous, and it has all of these things that I'm talking about. The I notice, I wonder, it reminds me of, because that's where it came from. And so I give those out to people, and that gave me the framework, the very simple framework, to be able to share nature journaling with, because I was struggling before. I thought, well, how do I share this? How do I simplify it so that it's not overwhelming to people, and I'm not overwhelmed having to be talking for a while. We want to just be doing rather than listening to me. So this this is a free um, quick start guide that anyone can download from thewildwonder.org. So, and then locally, last year I discovered that there was a Sammamish Botanical Garden Society in my neighborhood. And I got involved with them. I did a workshop, nature journaling workshop in the garden in August. It was the most magical experience, just a lovely group. So that also gave me the confidence. And now that I'm involved with them more, um, I do monthly meetups. And this month we'll be starting, we did it in the library in the winter because of the weather, but now that things are starting to bloom, we'll be heading into the garden monthly to just have a brief introduction and then just sketch and notice. And it's such a relaxing experience. And so
Mm.
it's just a quiet activity process for people to do. So,
You're making me wish I lived in Washington, Karen, so I could
yeah,
go.
it's such
Oh,
a special place. Well, this garden is a heritage garden that the plants are plants that were grown when the early settlers came to this area. And there's a historic home on the property. It's surrounded by forest with nature trails. So it has the best of both worlds, everything. We were weeding the other day and a barred owl started calling, in the morning. And so and the hummingbirds are coming in, the chickadees are going into the little houses on the sides of the fence. So that has also given me a joy and a confidence to be able to share with people in my own community. So,
It sounds wonderful.
yeah, thank you.
We
Yeah.
need to figure out how to put a webcam on you somehow so that we can transmit it to all of us who want to see what you see and then learn from you that way.
Oh,
That would be fun, actually. I'm gonna put that, in a pin somewhere of how to bring that virtually to someone who wants to see it.
oh, be interesting. Yeah.
Would. Well, where can listeners find you? Give us the places, your social media, website. Is there anything that you're doing soon that you could tell them about for people who are local for you, could come find you? Tell them all the things.
Right. So I am chasing butterflies on Instagram, and I am chasing butterflies.wordpress.com is my blog. And I do have some resources on the blog as well. And I just write a blog post about every couple of weeks, just about something that's really sparked my interest, and only about 10% of what I do is on the blog, but Instagram I tend to post more things on there. Just things that I'm noticing and enjoying and wanted to share. And so what's coming up is in locally the monthly nature journaling. It's just drop in, and we have the dates on the Sammamish Botanical Garden Society website. And so that's really fun. We do educational programs as well that include families or all ages, different nature subjects. And of course, in the summer, we'll be having those right in the garden. So it'll be just a combination of things and getting to know, instilling these nature interests in the younger generation right from the start. So,
Well, I can't be there in person, and I know there are many listeners that can't, but just listening to you today, hearing how you do it, your excitement behind it, these little techniques that make it accessible and exciting to kind of show up on the page in that way. I'm just so grateful that you came to share that with us because I can still feel the energy. I'm still just as excited. I may not be able to see your nature, but I am definitely eager to grab a little notebook. I've got a couple right behind me. I know exactly which one I'm going to grab on my next walk and just I'm going to start with that metadata. Like you said, I'm going to break the ice, write it down, and just sketch something and see how it feels, that feeling and that emotional piece. You've stoked the enthusiasm, but you've made me feel like I could do it now, Karen. So thank you.
oh, good. I'm so glad that you feel inspired, and hopefully other people will feel inspired too. And yeah, just taking that first step, and it might take several pages of getting your observations down to really find what you're interested in. I think one of the things I'm going to do this summer is just month by month document things that are happening at the Heritage Garden and what's blooming. So we kind of have this progression of what we can follow, what has been blooming at different times. So, and maybe in my own little garden in the back. So just,
Yeah.
observing how things are growing. So.
And I know it is your personal notebook, but that almost has like a published book in the making kind of feel. Documentation of that. Ooh.
It's something I've thought of, and I thought, well, who would want to look at that? And I would love to do that, have maybe certain pages put into a book for my family or a couple of friends. So maybe if I figure out how to do that, one day that might be a possibility. Yeah, if I can inspire somebody else, that's the main goal.
Well, you have mission accomplished with the person here on the call
Okay.
with you, but I know my listeners, and I know this is going to excite them as much it is us. And it's the perfect time of year to get out, right? It is spring, things are growing and changing and budding, and it's perfect to just grab a little notebook and see how you can feel, right? Not to even see what you can do, see how you can feel.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, just give yourself that energy, fill your cup, and then you have more to share with other people. So
Yeah. Thank you so much, Karen. I'm so glad we finally got to do this.
this has been such a fun chat. Thank you so much for inviting me.
Of course. And listeners, thank you for listening to another episode. And if you go out and try some nature journaling yourself, share it. If you're brave, post it somewhere, tag Karen, tag me, put it in our Get Literate Facebook community, or just keep it to yourself and let us know that you tried it. We'd love to know how it made you feel too. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening to today's episode of the Get Literate podcast. You'll find links to all the books, resources, and ideas mentioned in the show notes and at alitlife.com. And if you want more, you might like to join my Patreon community. There, you'll find additional inspiration for your reading and writing life, like bonus podcast episodes, book calendars, monthly book clubs, notebooking inspiration, live events, giveaways, and more. It's only $5 a month, and you get instant access to all of the previous content too. Learn more at getliterate.co. And one more thing, if you love what you listened to today, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast, or take a screenshot of the episode and text it to a friend. This helps the podcast grow, and it builds our bookish and notebookish community too. Thanks for listening.